My name is Pat Donohue, and I'm an assistant professor in instructional technologies here at San Francisco State. I've been in this position for about 8 months now, but I've actually worked as a lecturer here for the last 3.5, 4 years, and have done HyFlex the entire time that I've been here, starting when we worked with Illuminate, and then now when we're in Blackboard. So it's been an interesting experience, and I've enjoyed the challenges and the rewards. So the way that we use HyFlex in the classes that I teach are fairly open in the true sense of the HyFlex terms. We allow students to choose any week, whether they're going to come to class, whether they're going to attend class synchronously online, or whether they're going to not be able to be in class at the time that it's held, but attend asynchronously. And so the way that I shape that experience changes course to course, depending on the content of the course and what might work better for students who are attending particularly asynchronously. The challenge for the synchronous course is interesting because students in the class, I've gotten fairly good over the period of time that I've been here to involve those who are attending in Blackboard synchronously, as well as those who are attending in class. And that works fairly well. The classes differ depending on how many students are attending online versus how many students are attending in class. And that's always kind of an interesting dynamic, but whichever it is, there does seem to be a good interplay as long as I've structured the class for that specific interplay. So if you don't pay attention to involving the students who are online, then they can drop out of the experience and it'll change it dramatically. The ones who are attending asynchronous depends on the class. A lot of times I'll just have their attendance participation by forum discussions so that they can do the reading primarily and think about the subject matter of the reading that week, and then get into discussions online. They're pretty much not interactive discussions. They have often generated self-responsive discussions, but usually it's usually I require them to think about what it was they have learned, and usually require them to do something. So they're posting both and commenting on it. And then they will often review each other's work and comment on that too. So all in all, the choice of whether you do it one way or another has worked out pretty good. The challenge of doing courses asynchronously each week seems to be to keep the people who can't ever come to class interested in the course and engaged in the course. And that I find the most challenging. Most of the time in my classes, there'll be students who just choose not to come that week because it's raining or they got out of work late or whatever, and so they'll go home. And sometimes they'll do it synchronously online, but oftentimes they can't make it that week. So it's not a constant asynchronous attendance, but I do have a few who have done it that way. And usually the ones who do every week asynchronously, they work it out with you how to participate you know, to the level that they would like and the level that works for them. So that's worked pretty good over and all. I have a student this semester who was taking an online course at the same time as she's taking one of my courses. And in fact, I think she'll be talking about that. But it was interesting because we got through 2/3 of the course, and her online instructor had not been present at all in that course. She didn't know what she was doing, how she was doing, anything. And we're in class one day and she says, my instructor just showed up. So I think there's drawbacks, and it really depends on the instructor. You know, either way, it depends on the instructor. Okay. So we've talked about the benefits a lot in class, and students have volunteered a lot of information about that. And I see the benefits from my end as being able to have students attend every week. So in other words, if a student has a reason that they couldn't be in a normal face-to-face class, you have the option through asynchronous attendance to still have that student participate in that week's class in the way that you've allowed them to do that. And that, I think, is a real benefit, because a lot of times students will be out on vacation for a couple of weeks, or they'll have family emergencies, something along those lines that would just normally take them away, and they can't pay attention to their courses for that period of time, but they can come back and catch up and still do the normal attendance that they would do. And that's extremely beneficial, because today students are challenged in many ways. We have almost all working adults in our classes, and so they have a lot of external commitments and challenges that they have to meet in addition to coming to class. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit for me, is that we don't lose the consistency of what you're trying to help them learn and facilitate their learning. That's the biggest benefit, because if they're going to, if you don't have an asynchronous option, I mean, there's a lot of blended learning that is the synchronous and face-to-face, and that seems an easier way to deal with. But when you add the asynchronous component in, you really give full level options to students, and oftentimes that's the only option that they can choose. And so the fact that they can come when they normally couldn't come is one. The fact that they can even attend the class when they can't be here at all at the time that the class is going on. I have a couple of students every semester for whom that's the case. They can only do asynchronous. And although they will, you know, say that they miss the collegiality of talking synchronously with fellow classmates, they still really enjoy the experience. So I think that works. So I think there's a couple of benefits that that students have reported that they get online, and one is that oftentimes they can't physically come to the course, and it allows them to participate. I think the real benefit for students has been the synchronous attendance using Blackboard, and that allows them to actually participate when they want to be physically present all the time, but they can't. And so they have the liveliness that comes from the class because they're there. And if they're used to being a face-to-face student, they bring that kind of interactivity to the online world. Students who come to the synchronous Blackboard experience, you know, without being face-to-face, they're oftentimes not as interactive until they get trained up to be interactive. So even so, regardless of that period of time to get trained from one to the other, after a period of time they end up really enjoying the experience. And we've had recently some parallel discussions in the Blackboard to what's going on in class, and they're absolutely supplemental discussions, and the students will go, wait, I got to listen to what Dr. Donohue is saying, and then people in class are going, oh, they're having a great discussion online because they can see it, and that just stimulates the kind of liveliness that you'd like to have. Sometimes you can't even get in a face-to-face. So there's that benefit that comes from different modalities of interaction. The challenges are if there's no interaction.
Okay.
So then to talk about some of the challenges of HyFlex, the only challenge that I have in the synchronous combination is the technology itself. And that has just come because people report having really horrible audio experiences sometimes. So you have to fix that or attend to it. And over time, I've figured out to get additional microphones and make the experience at least a little bit more richer for those online. And it's interesting because it's made the face-to-face class cognizant of their colleagues who are in cyberspace listening in at the same time, because they'll make note now, oh, they're not hearing, you know, over the microphone, they're not getting what's going on, so we can stop and interact with each other in that kind of way. And while that's a challenge and it does sort of have that benefit, the students will also report the disruption of the teacher paying attention to who's online, and so you turn away from your in-class attendees to interact with those online, and then you'll turn back from those who are online and interact with the class. And that creates a disturbance barrier that happens frequently. And it's not something that you can't overcome, but it is disruptive, and so it depends on the student whether that particularly bothers them or not. I've had more than one student comment on that. And I think along with that same challenge is the fact that you have it's not inappropriate. You have a video camera that doesn't work because it's just in the computer. And so for the people who are attending online, they can't really see their colleagues in class like the colleagues in class can see them. And so that's a drawback that could facilitate, I think, a great deal more interaction. If we could go to that level, it would almost break down the distance barrier a little bit, which I think would be a real key. The other challenge, the biggest challenge, is in the asynchronous attendance. How you engage someone who's not there at a different time in the content when most of the content has been live interaction. And so you can have them engage in forum discussions, and I often have them create materials, especially using new technologies, and post those. So they have to learn how to create materials where they can audio over and post it up so people can hear and experience. And that's been okay, but as with all kinds of distance learning, I think it leaves a little bit of a gap that students miss. I know I miss. The challenge for me is to give them increasingly important work to do that's critical, but not the same as what we're doing in class. If you're considering doing HyFlex in your class or would like to try it out, I absolutely recommend giving it a try. It doesn't have to be perfect from the start, but you can find that you will engage your students in different ways than you've experienced to date. Students will be much more forthcoming when they can meet you in the instructional space differently. So they have a different way of responding to the class and responding to you. And what it manages to do is it manages to pick up some students who would normally not be that participatory in a face-to-face classroom. So to consider how to do that, I would recommend that you essentially do a lesson plan in 3 panels. Write out what you would normally do in your classroom or sketch it out for yourself, and then sketch out additional activities to add to that you would do for the synchronous people who are attending. And they're there, but you have to be conscious that they're in another medium, and so you have to have activities that are directed to them. So for instance, I'll have students do projects, and they've got projects to do with their online colleagues as well as their in-class colleagues. And the only difference is that they have to be aware, if they're having in-class people do an activity, that you have an online version of that activity. And so really it's just a translation that you prep for. And once you have that in place, it falls in pretty naturally when you're conducting the class. Then I would do the separate asynchronous planning for the class and figure out how best to have students do the kinds of activities, or parallel or synchronous activities that match the same thing that's in class. So if you plan out the 3 and you can do that week to week, you only have to do that once. You only have to really figure it out from 3 aspects one time. Because once you've done that, then you have the methodology in your brain and in your practice. It's sort of like riding a bike. Once you get it, you do it. And so you think that way from then on. And it's a challenge at the beginning, but only a little one, really. If you do some planning, it can come together quite well. And the rewards are really amazing. It'll be a self-discovery as you watch students come in and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I could have attended last week," or "I'm so glad that I was able to catch you online even though I was half hour late. I couldn't have gotten to class at all, but it was really good and I love that discussion," etc. So And there's plenty more of those kinds of rewards.